All right, so the problem we're approached with today is how can we determine how many seconds are in 2 decades? So there's two things we need to focus on first before we can even attempt to solve this problem. So the first thing you want to do is list what you're given. So in this example, we're told there are 2 decades. And bear with me, it's tough to write with this whiteboard. And we're trying to find how many seconds. I'm just going to write SEC and a question mark to say, that's our unknown. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to set up our given number. So we set it up so that we write 2 decades, and I'm just going to make this DEC for the sake of time. And we put this over 1 just so that our fractions kind of stick together. Anything divided by 1 is still just itself, so we haven't changed anything about that statement. So the first thing we need to do is kind of come up with a conversion factor that will get us out of decades and into a unit that is closer to what we're trying to find as seconds. And so the first thing you might be thinking is there's 10 years, and that's a Y, years is equal to, and you know what, let me clean that up a little bit for you, is equal to 1 decade. Again, just DEC for the sake of saving time. So then we can set this up in a way that, if you remember back to math class, that we need to cancel out what's in our numerator and put the new unit into the numerator here. So in this case, we're going to write 10 years up top, YRS, over 1 decade. When we do this, this allows us to now cancel out our unit decades. If you remember back to algebra class, it really is just by crossing out the numerator from the denominator. If you have any questions with that, feel free to message me. Feel free to ask me in class, and we can go through why that works. But for right now, I'm just hoping everyone kind of remembers that. So we're now out of decades and we're into years. Now, we could stop and actually calculate this out. However, doing our problems this way allows us to kind of make one calculation at the same time rather than having to stop and start over again. So do we have a conversion factor that will get us out of years and even closer to seconds? And some of you might say that in 1 year, right? There are 365 days. We're going to use the number 365 just for the sake of keeping things convenient. I know there are more than 365 days. It's really closer to 365.24 days in a year. But just for the sake of our calculations, we're going to keep it as simple as we can. And again, we're going to set up this factor so that years is on the bottom that we can cancel out. So 1 year is going to go on the bottom here. And the 365 days will go on top. So there we go. Again, don't let plurals mess you up. Remember, day and days, still the same unit, just plural of day is days. So years now will cancel out, and we're left in days. Days gets us somewhat closer, but we're still not there at seconds. So we have to come up with another conversion factor. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we have more room. We know that there are 24 hours in 1 day. So we can write that as one of our next conversion factors. In that case then, again, we set up this factor, and 1 day is going to come on the bottom here so that we can cancel out. And 24 hours on top. So we're now down into the day. Sorry, started writing day, thinking of the word I'm talking about. So we can cancel out days, and we're now into hours. So we're further in, we're getting closer to seconds. Days cancels out, now we're at hours. Again, another conversion factor to take it from there. You guys might be able to recall that there are 60 minutes, right, into 1 hour. And again, we're going to set up that factor so that the hour is on the bottom, and we have 60 minutes on top. Please don't mind that M. Again, it's a little difficult to write with this. So hours now cancels, and we're left in minutes. So we have one more stop before we get to seconds. And last but not least, we know that there are 60 seconds in a minute. And this finally gets us down to that desired unit, right? We're finally down to our seconds. So the last thing we need to do is set this up once again so that minutes cancel out. So we're going to put the 1 minute down here and this 60 seconds on top. All right, so lastly, minutes cancel out and we're left with our desired unit, which is seconds. So the only unit we have remaining is seconds, where we were supposed to be. All of our other units start to cancel out. If you have not done so already, you want to cancel out any units that have either one in the denominator and one in the numerator. For most of our problems, it's going to end up being just diagonal to the right. But there will be cases where you might have it further down the line. So with that being said, we can now finally solve for our answer. So if you remember back to math class, all we need to do is multiply everything in the numerator and multiply everything in the denominator and then divide them from each other. So in this case, we're going to do 2 times 10 times 365 times 24 times 60 times 60 all over, and you're going to see in this case it just works out that we're just doing 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. This won't always be the case. In the first couple problems we're going to do, this will be. In the future, you might have actual numbers in the denominator where you will actually have to calculate these out and divide them from each other. So what we're actually just going to have to do in this case is multiply everything in the numerator, and you end up with, and for the sake of not trying to butcher this, I'm going to type it out for you. You should end up with the answer 630720000 seconds. So if we were to say that in everyday speak, that is 630,720,000 seconds in 2 decades. And that is ultimately our answer. The reason we need to go through all this work is so that we can cancel out our units that we eventually get from one unit to the other. Hopefully this makes sense. We can go through a couple more questions if you guys need to. But all of our problems are really going to revert back to these, where we're looking for different conversion factors that are going to lead us into this answer, into our desired answer, and out of whatever the given information was. So thank you, and hopefully this will help.